You mentioned how you built a lot of your methodology by turning the mirror on yourself first. What was the moment that made you realize you needed to do this work on yourself before you could do it with teams?
One of the habits is seeking to understand before seeking to be understood. The center of my approach to things. That leads to one of the exercises I love to do, which is
Meet Todd Cantalupo, Senior Engineering Manager at KarmaCheck and Director Software Engineering at Meltwater, an engineering leader known for transforming fear into focus and building high-trust teams that consistently outperform.
going from fear to focus. First, you have to acknowledge the fear and figure out, why is this individual or team afraid right now? What is in their past? So when I go into a new organization, I like to do conversations with people to learn more about their history instead of just looking at their resumes or their profile.
Someone is listening to this. They recognize that their team is stuck in operating in more of like a fear mindset. If you had one recommendation that you think might have the biggest effect, what might that be?
That's a great question. I think
Welcome to the dark arts of software engineering and team optimization, where we pull back the curtain on what makes great leaders and engineering teams tick. I'm joined by my co-host, Kyle Johnson, and our guest today is Todd Cantalupo. Todd has spent over 25 years leading engineering teams at organizations like Meltwater and Thunderhead. And throughout that time, he's developed a reputation for something that sounds simple, but is maddeningly rare. He makes engineers actually want to work for him. But what really sets Todd apart is his philosophy that agile transformation isn't about frameworks or terminology. It's about people, about trust, about psychological safety. Today, we're getting into how Todd builds teams that don't just ship code, but actually evolve, and why so many agile transformations fail before they even start. Todd, welcome to the Dark Arts Podcast.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
It's a pleasure to have you, dude. So, let's jump right in. In our kind of pre-call and stuff, you mentioned how you built a lot of your methodology by turning the mirror on yourself first and noticing your own biases and assumptions. What was the moment or pattern that made you realize you needed to do this work on yourself before you could do it with teams?
That's a great question. I think it was the realization that I wasn't having the impact that I wanted to have, like almost like not meeting instant expectations of things being great or people just kind of listening to me. That initial kind of stages of management where you're like, okay, now I'm a manager. That means, I'm using air quotes around means that I have the answers, or at least I'm supposed to have the answers. And it wasn't until I was able to become more humble and recognize that I had to grow and have higher emotional intelligence, what people call it, right? But understand like where my feelings come from, what's behind it, and then what is the next action to take that I can control that will have an impact. And it's through that humility that I continue to do a bunch of reading. And one of the books that I read, it's Stephen Covey's, 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. One of the habits is seeking to understand before seeking to be understood. And that has been the crux, or really the center of my approach to things, because I want to be understood, but I can't just say something and expect people to know what I mean. And I recognize that that's the same kind of, I had to flip it, that mirror. There's that mirror piece, right? Where once I understood more about any other individual's journey to get to where they are, whether it be in life, their viewpoint, their opinion, the topic we're talking about, having a better understanding of how they got to where they are allows me to have a deeper conversation that moves the needle instead of me just talking at people and expecting them to listen.
Right. That's really interesting because I feel like that's very kind of counter to how a lot of people think about managing others and teams and stuff, in terms of, like, usually you have a team and they're supposed to understand you. They're supposed to do the work. So it's really cool that you've kind of flipped that and think about, I need to be understood first and stuff. And Do you think that that's something that sort of way to lead is something that is kind of unique in the industry? You encountered a lot of other people with those same kind of ideas as you around this.
It might be a little unique, but I also learned from my mentors or bosses, managers, people that I reported to that helped kind of build that approach. But I also have this just popped into my head, so I'll say it and we'll
Yeah,
see
go
what
for it.
that I've noticed that a lot of the knowledge that I've accumulated, it's almost created this expectation that, well, if I know it, everybody else knows it. And I don't know if that's just kind of, I don't know where it came from, but that's like a belief I had that this is obvious to everybody. So why would I even say it? Or why would I even kind of do it? Because if I know it, that means everybody else already knows it. Not recognizing that my path has been unique and I got to where I am based on the gazillion different factors or events that happened in my life. And everybody has that. Everybody is unique and has that path. So when I think about what, answering that question, is this something that I've encountered in the industry? I guess a lot of it's, I'm going to say no. I definitely, from some key people who have had a huge impact on my life, like Lisa Adkins is somebody that I've been thinking a lot about lately. She's the author of Coaching Agile Teams and has been the instructor in a lot of the courses I took to get my IC Agile certifications. She was great, but she is a very empathetic listener. And it was through, I'm not sure where I'm going with this, but here we go. One of the courses, Coaching Agile Teams, she and Michael Spade was her co-educator at this. They started demonstrating the arc of a conversation where they had a volunteer come up from the class and they just started to have a conversation like, what is it that you do, blah, blah, blah. And I watched this arc of the conversation, which is based on coactive coaching. And it it went from this individual talking about their job and some of the challenges they had to them breaking down at the end and realizing they were in the wrong career and didn't want to do this anymore. And it blew me away. I will never forget it. Getting goosebumps just thinking about it because it was through just seeking to understand. There it is again. It is like, asking these follow-up questions that basically got this person to really take the time to think about where they are now, where they want to be, and realize they're on the wrong path. And I don't know what happened with this person, but man, that
Yes.
conversation really left an impact on me. And that's how I have tried to approach interactions since is like, what are you actually feeling? How, what are those thought processes? What are the emotions you're feeling? And I keep going back to that because I'm an emotional guy. So I have all those emotions go through. I've learned I can't control them. I can't stop them. So you need to have techniques or tools or mechanisms to handle it and decide what you're going to do. Like if something angers you, you can't just turn it off. It's like, when someone's upset and you tell them, just calm down. Like, oh,
Right,
It's that
right.
oh,
That's
of
easy.
not
course.
going to
Oh,
work.
I'll run right ticket. I'll just calm down. It's hold on a second. Okay, now I'm calm. It's like that never works. So
Yeah.
you have to acknowledge it. Let the feelings take their course of action, and if they feel like they're going to take a long time, set a time limit on it, or time box it. Like I try not to give myself any more than 3 to 5 minutes of feeling that pain, and try to reduce it down to as little as 90 seconds, and just recognize that it's a physiological response. It's your limbic brain, it's your lizard brain just taking over and saying, this is what we're doing right now. And then you just let it run its course or vocalize it, bring it to the forefront, so that it kind of minimizes that lizard brain reaction and allows you to logically and decidedly take the next action. And usually from that place of a little more clarity, the next step has more of an impact than an angered response.
That's really cool. I feel like you're approaching your work as less of like a manager slash leader and more of like as a teacher philosopher. Particularly when you mentioned that one bit about kind of listening to that conversation arc, that reminds me a lot of kind of, the Socratic method of teaching. Less about telling people and more about asking people questions that lead them to their own realizations, So I just kind of find that really like fascinating, and frankly, I think it's very effective. And, in our own work, right, with Hellenic, I feel like the people that we work with are always very surprised at how we manage them, for lack of a better word, right? And often find people being like, this has never been done before in my career, and it feels so good to be treated as like a human as opposed to like a robot, an automaton that does a job.
The short answer was no, right? Do you see a lot of other people doing this? And I think that's kind of, we work generally just with engineers, and a lot of times it's a certain profile of person, and like the schooling looks a certain way and the university teaches a certain way, and it's not necessarily like a lot of time is spent on maybe self-care as much as could be. So yeah, and what's even crazier is the guy on that stage was Franz, and he's still doing the same thing and he's still miserable. But that's a side point. Maybe we can work through that today, later on in the call.
It's going to end with me crying this podcast.
Yes, that's a good podcast. If it ends with Franz crack. Yeah, exactly.
Happy tears. Yeah. Breakthrough tears.
Breakthrough, exactly. Well, I would like to kind of transition more into what you were kind of starting to go into, Todd, though, is specifically about, we had discussed last time we chatted, how you help teams transition fear into focus. And so I would like to kind of have you dig a little bit deeper on what that is in practice. And I know, that fear can be a fear of just underperforming, a fear of looking stupid in front of the group, or losing their job, like whatever those fears are that you as a leader are trying to figure out, okay, what is it, right? Like, how do I address something if I don't know what it is? But I would love to have you chat a little bit more about your methodology, how you kind of draw that out of people.
Sure. Yeah. Those are great examples. I've, found myself experiencing all of those, between fear of losing your job, fear of not being good enough, fear of your next review, fear of making a coding mistake that nobody catches that brings down production, or like any of those things. Those are real. They're not as life-threatening as, the saber-tooth tiger analogy or metaphor you hear about. I never know which one, analogy, metaphor, it doesn't matter. But it still makes people defensive and makes them less open and less able to hear too. When you're in that state, when you're afraid, you're not really processing, you're not present, you're not engaged. So going from fear to focus is, first you have to acknowledge the fear and figure out, again, seeking to understand, why is this individual or team afraid right now? What is in their past? So again, getting back to seeking to understand and learning more about their journey. What's the history? So when I go into a new organization, I like to do coffee chats or whatever, just conversations with people to learn more about their history instead of just looking at their resumes or their profile or whatever. Having a conversation and learning more about all the different transitions, the things that have excited them, the things that have scared them. I like to ask questions like, what is the biggest mistake you've made? Not initially, first, like, what are you most excited about? Why are you doing the things that you're doing? But then also be like, what are some of the biggest mistakes you've made? Because I found, at least for me, some of my biggest mistakes have also learned to my greatest learnings and lasting impact. So that, I'm never going to let that happen again. Those are the experiences I like to hear about, because it kind of informs you as a leader as to how somebody might be looking at the next project or something. Like, an example that popped into my head earlier this week was typically when someone is about to get a new project, or someone with the vision is like, okay, we're going to build this amazing solution that's going to scale to millions of users and be super responsive, and the user experience is going to be amazing. And immediately, typically, an engineer is like, that's crazy. That's not going to happen. How do you think we're going to do that? What are you, nuts? So like that initial, what causes that initial reaction? Is it a project in the past that failed? Is it, like what is it? So that initial fear, you have to have the conversation about it. Right. So like, why did you react that way? Once you have kind of a bunch of those conversations, and then you have another conversation as a team about whatever the backlog is, or the visions, or, not the visions, the vision of the product, or the alignment. It's all getting to the alignment.
How long does it take, right? Because I feel like if you're like, you get hired on somewhere, it's the first couple of weeks, you're having a bunch of one-on-ones with a bunch of brand new people, and you're like, hey, what's the scariest thing or the hugest mistake you ever made? Are they even going to tell you? Like, if you're their manager, right? They're like, oh, I totally screwed up production this one time. And it's like, maybe I'm just not going to talk about that.
Yeah.
So I'm wondering, like, do you find it difficult to,
Yeah.
like, maybe you just don't ask that straight away. You kind of feel them out a little bit and, find out how many kids they have and where they went to school and kind of, ease into it a little bit. But I'd just be curious if, or you just right out of the gates, like, what is the biggest mistake you've ever made in your career? And like, how hard is it to figure that information out?
It's easier once you divulge what your biggest mistake is, right? Leaders go first. So you have to demonstrate vulnerability and openness to ridicule or judgment in order for somebody else to feel safe enough to do it. And I'm completely comfortable looking like an idiot. I've actually said that to people who like don't want to get into a conflict with someone. I'll be like, I'll play the dumb guy. I'm happy to have that conversation on your behalf. And then when you feel comfortable, jump in, which is funny because those fears you talked about, it's funny to me because you talked about fear of embarrassment, fear look like an idiot. It's like, those are my fears too, except for when I decide it's okay. So if I'm able to control the situation, be like, all right, I'm willing to look like an idiot in order to progress this conversation, then that's fine. But yes, the timeline, when do you do that? It's kind of a sense I get. I'm reading the room, if you will. It's different for every individual. But at the same time, you want to make an impact quick, especially in a leadership position, especially for a large business that's, or enterprise that's paying you a lot of money. They want to see an impact quickly. So I'd like to have those kind of conversations concluded within the first 30, 45 days anyway, just so that you understand more the team history, how they're going. If you're doing sprints, that gives you, 2, 3, maybe 4 sprints kind of under the belt to understand how the team's looking at their backlog, how they're approaching their day to day, how are they coordinating with themselves and with other teams. And is it one person who does all the work and 2 other people are just kind of on their coattails? Like, what's the picture? And then through those sprints, if you're doing sprints or even if you're doing Kanban or whatever, as long as you have that at least monthly retrospective where you look back at, how the teams, I know everybody knows about retros here. And then you're able to implement any of those changes that are suggested from a retro. Otherwise, it just, there's no point of having a retro if you don't take action with what comes out of it. That demonstration as a leader that I am hearing you during this group conversation, and we agreed that we were going to execute in this way to make this specific impact on our next iteration, it helps build that trust where then people are more likely to open up and be like, yeah, I remember this one time I hit init 0 and it just destroyed everything. Or I think I said this last time, the blue-green deployment went purple. And now, now what do we do? Like those kinds of things. And it also helps build trust. It deepens the trust when you're able to admit a mistake and you don't get fired. Yeah, someone might give you a hard time or bust your chops a little bit, but that's human nature, and you need to be able to roll with it. And this just popped into my head. It's like that radical transparency from, was it the Blackstone Group? Ray Dalio. Ray Dalio. Yeah, radical transparency. That just, as long as everybody understands that any feedback you're going to get, whether it feels critical or not, is all meant to help you grow and learn and deepen your skill set, help the team, help the business, as long as it's understood that whatever's about to be said to you is so that there's growth involved, then it allows you to be more resilient next time something happens, right? It deepens that trust. And that's what I keep coming back to, because a team that trusts each other is going to execute so much faster than you ever thought they could, because they're willing to have the difficult conversations. They're willing to call somebody out. They're willing to highlight some things that aren't as smooth so that the group learns and you're able to produce faster.
Yeah. I think the expectations are lifted for everybody too, right? So it's like, you will call someone on their bullshit maybe faster, right? Because you're all comfortable and you've had this conversation, you put in the time, and they can handle it. So
Yeah, I kind of feel like it's like going back to kind of Kyle's original question is like, how long? I feel like there's kind of 2 answers there if I'm kind of summarizing, getting what you're saying correctly, I mean, I think the first answer is for yourself to begin the conversation and kind of get people to admit this thing about fear. But then I feel like the secondary part of it that takes much longer is kind of deprogramming people from their kind of gut reactions to fear in the company, right? It's only through that process that you were just talking about of kind of going through experiences and seeing that the results aren't what they expected that really kind of instills the idea that you don't have to be afraid in your position and can kind of get beyond that initial fear of losing your job or underperforming or looking stupid. But it's not something that is going to, and maybe I'm wrong here, but I feel like it's not something that's going to instantly kind of distill into the team through a conversation. It's through practice that actually becomes solid.
Yes, practice. That's perfect. I was, I have my own coach, and I had my coaching call today. And I'm a drummer. I've been playing music for a very long time, and one of the things that came out of the conversation was an area where I feel completely comfortable. Like I can do anything, and it's when I sit down behind my drum set. And it's the reason I have such confidence there and certainty there is through the practice. Breaking complex rhythms or compositions into smaller components that are easier to digest, easier to learn from, whether, learning to like Hot for Teacher for Van Halen. That song is super difficult on the drums. I've been trying to learn it for 30 years, and it's
What?
only over
Really?
well, on and off, with a few years on, a few years off, just, I'm gonna try this again, and then you hit that frustration wall, and you're like, this is too hard, I can't do it." And it's like, "Wait a minute, break it down. Remember, I know hundreds and hundreds of other songs. How did I learn those songs? Bring the tempo down. Bring it down 50%." So, that could be a new team on a sprint, not committing to filling up every single hour of every day for the sprint. But like, okay, we're forming, let's say 50% capacity. Let's slow it down to 50% and see how that goes. Now, granted, you have to have support from the top and able to do this, or you got to figure out different ways to allow this to happen. But breaking down the tempo, breaking if you're able to read sheet music, you print out the sheet music, and you have where all the different stick strikes map to the different drums, whether the toms, the snare, the kick, the hi-hat, the crash, like all of that is on sheet music. You can read it. And then it's through practicing and being committed to practicing, knowing what your outcome is, and your outcome is playing it right, or hitting the production in time, or whatever your sprint goals or release goals are. Like, but that metaphor comes into play for anything, something super complex. Complexity is the enemy of progress, right? Everything needs to be as clear as it can be, and it also can't be overwhelmed or terrified of the complexity, because just look at all the different projects most engineers or leaders have accomplished in their career. Thinking back about different releases or different companies you may have helped build, or different revenue markers, or whatever it is that you're measuring. It all came down to being focused on the outcome, and then being flexible to get to the path. Like what it's supposed to look like, so let's practice until it gets there.
Kind of, you're talking about that complexity and, focus and stuff. And reminds me of something that you mentioned before, which is how you're very much against 50-50 role splits.
Yes.
And, so I just kind of like to hear more from you, kind of, again, relating to kind of focus and productivity. Like, what's the case against them, and what's the alternative ultimately?
Well, the case against them for me is again drawn from personal experience. When I'll be mindful of not saying business names or company names, but through one acquisition, the platform or the environment. So when I was still coding, full stack developer, I used to use Eclipse as an IDE, for example. So I had all of the latest tools to empower me to be the best engineer I could be, right? So like autocomplete or suggestions, or like, function libraries, and like everything is defined, and you hit period, and all the different options for the functions pop up and you can select one. So anyway, I went from that kind of environment to having to code in a text area, and it made me crazy. Like I had to copy code, put it into the text area, uh, copy it from the text area, put it in Eclipse, and have all those helper functions and everything available to me, and then put it back into the text. It made me crazy. And at the same time, through that acquisition, there was the elimination of a layer of management. And in that elimination was a lot of our deep agile knowledge. People who brought, for example, there's a book from Gene Tabaka, Collaboration Explained, I think it was, back in like 2007, 2008. Like that's an example of, we had a leader who knew enough to bring this expert in and kind of coach us on team dynamics and things of that nature. So anyway, we get rid of that layer of management. So it provided a challenge and an opportunity in that we didn't have our agile coaches anymore. We didn't have our kind of dedicated scrum masters. So it allowed me to step into a role where I was 50% scrum master and 50% individual contributor. And I found myself butting up against critical decisions where it's like, I committed to get this code completed today, but I also committed that I was going to facilitate this conversation between these two teams, or that where there's some friction. Which one wins? And I found myself struggling to answer that question. I was like, I have to decide which is going to have the biggest impact, or which person I want to upset, or which team I want to upset, and deal with that. So
Right.
it's not to say that you can't have dual roles, but I think they should only be temporary. And really, if you can distill the essence of that role to make it as simple, again, eliminating complexity, like you're going to be responsible for these 3 things instead of these 10 things. Right? So you might have to redefine the role to make it more reasonable and fit for the individual that's going to be stepping into that. Because ultimately, at the end of the day, I found myself not feeling successful no matter what choice I made, because of my human nature and my tendency to focus on what's wrong first versus what's been good. Because, you want to solve the next problem. You're like, okay, so in order to solve the problem, you have to identify a problem. And sometimes there isn't a problem, so you make one up. That's when I lobbied to become a full-time Scrum Master and only focus on that. And I am very thankful for this organization's commitment to investing in me. And that's where I started my journey on agile coaching that ultimately led me to management. But it was that agile kind of base, those values, that approach, the servant leadership that's just resonates. That's who I am. I am a servant leader. That's just how I'm wired. I get all my personality tests to support it and everything. That has been my passion, and that's what has led me to where I am now. But it also empowered me to recognize when I was putting other people in that spot. They're like, okay, someone left, so we need someone to step into this role and take it on. Or anytime you promote an individual contributor to a management role, or a team lead role, or a tech lead role, you have to adjust the expectations for what they were used to doing. If you're used to coding all day, or
Right.
that mindset, and now you're in a spot where you may have to make some decisions about how others are going to do their job. So you have the 2 roles with, let's say, 10 responsibilities in each. And then you're asking one person to do those 2 roles, essentially doubling their list of responsibilities. It's unrealistic. It's not fair to the individual. You may find that rare individual that's like, bring it on, and they're willing to work, 16 hours a day, but that's not sustainable either. You're going to burn out. So you have to again, looking at like the vision, what do you want ultimately? You have this 50-50 role. You want to allow or enable the person to be successful in it. So what needs to come off? What set of responsibilities aren't as valuable as when you have a person dedicated to it 100% of the time?
Yeah, but I also guess like part of it is, I guess, like also what the people taking the role believe their role is going to be,
Yes,
right?
well said. And that leads to one of the exercises I love to do, that we talked about, which is, how do you know what people believe? And so you just ask them. It's just that simple. But you do it in a way that they're not, they don't realize that they're divulging their belief system and their values. So let me get to the example that
Yeah.
I've used and I've gotten the most positive feedback about. It's simple. It's just ask somebody what they believe to be true about blank. So I've used this for development teams where I've had, junior engineers up to principal engineers, architects, UX designers, QA engineers, product managers, and I bring them together and I ask, what do you believe to be true about your role? Like, how do you be successful in your role? And engineers are like, I need to understand the code. I need to understand the latest technologies that are out there. I need to be able to mentor junior engineers, or I need to be, I don't know. I'm the onboarding buddy for new team members when they come in. So I need to be mindful of the onboarding process, or I need to facilitate the conversations between product and other engineers because there's a mismatch. Like, that's just one example. Product managers, like, I need to explain to the engineers why I want it built this way. And then, like, if you have a product manager who wants to solution like that, typically that creates friction because
Right.
the product's supposed to be the what, and engineer is supposed to be the how, right? But sometimes you have product people who might dabble in the how a little bit and want to.
Mm-hmm.
I see it as the best solution. So anyway, I'm getting off track. Just for having that conversation, and I do it in a mind map format where you say one thing, and then that capture may spawn into a couple other ideas, so that you have this kind of visual representation of everybody's individual belief system. And then when you share it with others, it just opens everything up where you're able to have conversations. It's like, how did you get to that conclusion? Like, I don't think that's part of my role as an engineer, and you're an engineer. How come your belief is different? And then it gets, again, back to that essence, seeking to understand. It's like, how? And then once you realize what people love about their job or what they might not love about that job, it helps kind of spread the load or allow the team to come up with an approach to a solution that best harnesses the skill set of that team.
Yeah, and I think you're unwinding all these assumptions, right? Because it's like how
Yes.
we just operate on
Yes.
assumptions by default, I think a lot of us. So they're just assuming that the product team thinks this, right? And then the product team's assuming that the engineering, they think this way because of whatever past experiences that have shaped our belief system. So I love that you get everybody together and just let's walk through, right? You assume this, he assumes that, she assumes this. Like, if we lay all this stuff out here, we can actually start to mind map, like you said, why people are making certain decisions or, leading a certain way. So I think that's an awesome way to unlock that. And the way that you kind of systematically work your way through, right? Because like you said, you can't come in the first week and be like, hey, everybody, we're getting together and I'm going to ask you all these super vulnerable questions without sharing anything about myself. Do as I say, not as I do. Yeah, I think you built a very cool framework.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, it's feedback has been positive about it, that's for sure. And it feeds my passion because I love to learn how people.
Yeah.
I just it's fascinating to me. And it's something that I've always had. And it frustrates some people. They're like, "Why do you care?"
Yeah.
Like, I don't know, because I just so
Well, and
it's had its highlights and its lowlights.
I was
But
going to ask,
ultimately,
have you ever experienced where it like just flat out does not work with either a group or within a group, or maybe just like certain members of the group
Or management
yeah, or
even, like, just
management, like there's some
above and like,
aspect
absolutely not.
it's not,
We don't care.
yeah.
yeah, yeah, for sure, especially if you're in an environment that's very much command control, like micromanagement or just micromanagement. It's harder to have those conversations, and you might have to reduce the amount of time spent on those things because you yourself may be being micromanaged or this huge deadline. But then it kind of shifts the conversation where you can still ask, what do you believe to be true, or what do you believe about, but you change the aspect to not about your role necessarily, but more about how we're going to approach this project with a deadline, or we only have 6 weeks to get this done. Here are the expectations or requirements. What's reasonable? Let's have that conversation. What do you believe to be true about what's possible to get this done? Because there are definitely some leaders out there who don't have the history that I do, or don't have that mindset where it's people first. It could just be technology first, or business first, or money first. But at the same time, business is about making money and growing the business. So those are definitely factors in there. So
That's what I've been doing wrong. It's about making money and growing the business. Oh my!
but like that just speaks to those are businesses I don't like to work with. And when I recognize that I'm not going to get the support, I'm not going to be able to have the influence that I'd like to have. Again, I don't expect people to just listen to me, because I want to understand why someone might not be listening to me, so that I could change my approach as a responsible communicator. That it means that I didn't get my point across. So what can I change to get it across? And if ultimately I reach that point where my message is not going to get across, I'm not a fit for this organization, then, I'll move on.
Yeah, that makes sense. So yeah, I guess a takeaway there is all this is great in practice, but it probably becomes pretty difficult if you don't have support like a level above you, right? Or like, I feel like if someone's bringing in Todd, they're going to understand where you're coming from, hopefully, and bring you in for a particular reason, because they want you to bring your methods. They want you to bring that to the team. So I would hope anyways that, when you're coming into like a net new organization, there's purpose behind it, and you're not instantly going to be hitting your head up against a brick wall.
You just described my last gig. I call them all gigs. It's a musician in me. They knew my history, they knew my approach, and that's exactly why they brought me in, to apply those skills and rapidly grow engineering. And we were successful. It was a fun ride.
That's awesome.
So yeah, that's well said. Perfectly said, Kyle.
Oh wow, I'm gonna have to tag that and cut that. I don't think anyone's ever said that. I guess I have one more kind of closing question. This would be more for the audience, I guess. But if someone is listening to this in a few weeks or in a few days, they recognize that their team is stuck in operating in more of like a fear mindset. If you had one recommendation, right? Like one thing, one action item that they could walk away with and do that you think might have the biggest effect, what might that be?
Empathetic listening, because in order to really do that, you have to set aside your agenda, you have to set aside your preconceived notions, and you need to give that person the space to speak. Don't interrupt them. You have a question pop up in your head, stifle it. Just let them get their question or their statement or whatever. Just let it all come out. And that allows you to then, I don't know, move forward a little bit there. I just get distracted because I was like, wait, what was the exact wording of his question? And I thought I lost it again. So did I get it?
It was actually an opportunity that you could have just answered like, hey, call Todd,
True. Oh, okay. Yeah.
We'll cut it.
That's the answer.
That'll be the
Hire
answer.
me.
Yeah.
Bring me in as a consultant.
Exactly.
I will fix
Let me
everything.
help.
No, it really does come down to that, because in order to understand the business problem, you have to listen. In order to understand, if this person you're interviewing is the right fit, you need to listen. You can't just be like, oh yeah, that's great. Oh yeah, next question. You have to listen. When you're looking at pitching solutions to customers, you need to listen to what their problem is so you can describe how your solution will alleviate their problem. If you're not listening, you're not going to hear the tidbits of information that could be huge catalyst for a massive impact. If that doesn't work, I can help.
Well, to that end, if someone wants to find you, where should they look?
Now you can look at lupoempowerment.com. I'm also on LinkedIn. You can find me, just search for Todd Cantalupo and DM me, reach out. There's a discovery session link on my website. Feel free to book some time. Let's have a conversation.
Awesome.